These charts tell us a lot about Britain's economy, especially this one. Productivity is the most fundamental and significant factor determining the standard of living, or the most influential source of economic performance. Without productivity, a nation can only increase the goods and services consumed. If more people work or they work for more hours, it comes with higher wages, profits, and tax revenues. As Paul Krugman, the Nobel laureate in economics, once said, productivity isn't everything, but in the long run, it is almost everything. Since the Second World War, productivity grew steadily. So by the mid-2000s, British workers produced as much 5 of their counterparts 100 years earlier. But productivity stopped growing around the time of the financial crisis of 2008 to 2009. This sudden rupture is known as the productivity puzzle. Zoom in and it's clear. There's been almost no growth since 2008. A worker today produces the same amount in an hour as someone 10 years ago. Although many countries have suffered a slowdown, this increased productivity gap between the typical British worker and the US, Germany, and France explains why the British economy has suffered unprecedented shocks in recent years among the G7 countries. Over the long run, productivity growth, or the ability to produce more with less, is all that really matters for rising living standards. Although, in theory, economies can grow when people work longer hours, at some point, that strategy is limited by employees' health and the number of hours in a day. Raising labor productivity, or the amount workers can produce in an hour, can happen with investment. Or it can happen with greater total factor productivity, a measure of the overall efficiency with which capital and workers are used. Total factor productivity is linked with better management practices or stiffer competition, though Britain does not have these. If Britain had it, its productivity would be 25% higher if the pre-crisis trend had continued. But don't think Britain lacks the best companies right at the forefront of technology. They have these superstar companies, but sadly, they also have an enormous rump of low productivity companies. It's been like this for decades. The problem now is that British workers lack the necessary skills. The data from OECD shows that England had one of the largest proportions of low-skilled young workers among advanced economies. For decades, Britain has struggled to provide people with the specific skills that employers require, ranging from engineering to welding. The proportion of the population with higher secondary qualifications, that is, people who do not pursue a degree but continue to study after the age of 16, is around 32%, well below the OECD average of 42%. Collaboration among vocational schools, further education colleges, businesses, and local governments is minimal. Plans for lifelong learning are just that, plans. Meanwhile, housing and retail are the most vulnerable markets in the economy. When people buy or sell houses, either to live in or as an investment, we refer to this as the housing market. A house is the most valuable thing many people will ever own. In Britain, 2/3 of households own the house they live in. Half of these are still paying off their mortgage. The remaining third of households are renters, split pretty equally between private and social renting. So Britain is now suffering a sharp contraction in home building. The UK's 13-year housing market boom is coming to an end. Mortgage rates have been ticking upwards, and house prices are falling. Mortgage repayments are swallowing up 17% of people's incomes. This comes on top of a cost of living crisis driven by rising food and energy prices, which is already hitting many hard. Now they feel even poorer as their homes fall in value, making them reluctant to shop. Consumers are more likely to spend money on goods and services when they feel confident. When they feel less confident, they are more likely to cut their spending to save money, and their spending patterns could lead to an economic slowdown or recession. UK consumer confidence has fallen to its lowest level since the 1970s. It was even worse than during the financial crisis a decade ago. As a net energy importer, the UK has seen energy prices soar, as the Russian invasion of Ukraine has driven up natural gas prices. European pipeline gas prices hit record highs over the winter, and liquefied natural gas is in high demand globally. The conflict has also increased food prices, and businesses are charging more for their goods and services because of the higher costs they face. Well, this behavioral economic indicator tells us that the UK may be the first nation to fall into recession in the coming future. As the United Kingdom is one of the most globalized economies and comprises England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, everyone will be affected. The service sector dominates in Britain, around 81% of GDP. This is mainly driven by the financial services industry in London, the largest financial center in the world. Information technology services, transport equipment manufacturing, and pharmaceuticals also contributed, all industries typically thought to be among Britain's strengths. But these industries are more heavily regulated. They may not seem as productive as before. The most obvious weakness of Britain is investment. Since the financial crisis in 2008, global foreign direct investment has been volatile. The UK witnessed a decline in inbound investment projects from 2008 to 2012. And from 2012, the UK had been on an upward trajectory until 2017. Although all three FDI types, new investment, expansions and mergers and acquisitions, have fallen in the UK since the Brexit vote, the most significant impact has been seen in expansions. It is not the only investment that brings down Britain consistently investing less than France, Germany, and America. It has also long spent less on research and development. Science, technology, and innovation have had a profound impact on economic growth throughout history. Although many experts say it is now harder to reap big gains from a good idea than it was in the past. During the industrial revolutions of the 18th and 19th century, technologies such as steam power and electricity turned the UK and US from agrarian economies into industrial powerhouses and transformed living standards. But today, Britain failed to become a science and technology superpower, whereas the US, China, and Japan are dominating the world economy with their innovation and technology. Even so, Britain is one of the most powerful countries and commands cultural influence worldwide. It is a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council and is a member of major international organizations, including the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, NATO, and the Group of 7 and 20. But Britain has no shortage of problems to fix. Policymakers play a crucial role here. If Britain is to avoid a bleak future, it must grasp reform. That will require political courage, persuasion, and the ability to think of new ways of doing things.